faded yellow e-bike rose from the depths of the Mississippi River after a flood, but the girl who once rode it was gone without a trace. Ayanna Brooks had left East Atlanta in the spring of 2017, setting off on a solo journey through the American South with nothing but her camera, a canvas, bag, and a promise to text her mom every evening. The last message came at 6:14 p.m. on April 27th. There's more kindness here than I thought. It's beautiful. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. And then silence. A silence that stretched on for 7 long years. Her family searched everywhere. The hills of Tennessee, the forgotten towns of Mississippi, and finally the muddy riverbanks of Louisiana. They found her final selfie. Her last GPS, ping, and then nothing. No footprints, no witness, no trace. Until the bike surfaced, its handlebars broken, frame coated in river mud. And inside the battery compartment, a crumpled paper map with a single blue circle drawn by hand. Why did Ayanna veer off her planned route? Who kept her bike hidden all those years? And why throw it into the river now? This is the story of a young black woman who vanished in the heart of America and what was uncovered long after the world stopped looking. You're watching Hidden Echoes, where we share the voices left behind, the disappearances left unsolved, and the stories no one else will tell. Ayanna Monet Brooks was born on a September morning in Passaic, a quiet East Atlanta neighborhood where tall pine trees lined the narrow roads like silent guardians of time. Her mother, Claudine, was the head nurse at a community hospital, and her father, Luther Brooks, was a retired electrician who stepped away from high-voltage lines after a serious back injury ended his 20-year career. Ayanna grew up between two worlds, the structured, modest world of her parents' generation, where worth was, measured by showing up on time and not bothering. Others, in a newer world unfolding in images, sounds, social media, and mobile dreams. Though her family was far from wealthy, her parents always worked to give Ayanna space to explore freely. At 8, she was given her mother's old nursing school film camera, and she began to photograph everything. Foggy windows in the early morning, kids playing, basketball in backyards, sunlight glinting off her father's wrist as he fixed the washer. She didn't talk much about her feelings, but somehow, her photos always said what needed saying. Ayanna wasn't loud. She wasn't the kind of person who took up space, but she listened. Classmates remembered her as the one who'd wander off from the group, only to return with a photo that made the room fall silent. After earning a degree in visual arts, she turned down a job offer from an ad studio and chose to freelance instead, shooting weddings, portraits, or just wandering with her camera. She once spent a month in New Orleans photographing elderly people in neighborhoods nobody ever wrote about. When asked why she didn't choose a stable path, Ayanna just smiled. Stable doesn't mean true. I want to find what's real. Her mother worried about her daughter traveling alone with just an e-bike and a camera bag, no steady job, no health insurance, no safety net. But Claudine had also taught Ayanna to be brave, so she never stopped her. In the spring of 2017, Ayanna launched a personal photo project called South of Memory, an attempt to document ordinary yet vivid life in Black communities across the American South. She planned to travel by electric bike, carrying only the essentials: her camera, a solar-powered charger, and an old notebook. Her route started in Atlanta, passed through Macon, Montgomery, Mississippi, and Louisiana, with a return loop through Tennessee. A circle, she described in her project. Notes, but one that doesn't close. At each stop, she stayed with local families, connected through community, travel groups, interviewed elders in barbershops, photographed cracked porches, aging groceries, and working hands. She didn't want to tell stories through headlines or politics. She wanted the South told through glances, gestures, and daily rhythms. To Ayanna, these small details were how a person remained real in communal memory, and she didn't want anyone to be forgotten. When she set out, no one thought it would be the last time her mother saw her. Claudine still saw the thin little girl who used to run, inside, holding a fluffy cat every time it rained. But the Ayanna who left at 29 was careful and prepared. She printed her route, mounted GPS on her handlebars, packed smart gear under 15 kilograms. She didn't like carrying much. She believed it forced her to ask questions, to stop, to pay attention. She created a tiny blog called Southern Small Things, where she posted weekly photos with brief captions. A 73-year-old man with shaky hands still opening his barbershop each morning in Selma, or a mother of Kisnefaho. 2, sitting outside a Louisiana faux shop, describing how silence taught her to parent. The blog didn't go viral, but those who followed it remembered every face she captured because they didn't feel like photos. They felt like living memory. Ayanna wasn't chasing influence. She didn't apply for grants. All she ever asked was, if someone offered her shelter, they'd tell her a story, one they feared would vanish if no one remembered. That request stayed with people. In rural Mississippi, an elderly woman recalled how Ayanna sat with her for 2 hours, just listening to a story about a handkerchief her late husband embroidered. In 1968, a grocer remembered her as the only person who asked to photograph the scar on my wrist, not the shelves, not the food, just that scratch from pushing carts years ago. At every stop, Ayanna threaded forgotten details into a quiet tapestry, and she did it with patience, presence, and eyes that truly listened. The one thing that gave her family peace was her nightly habit, a message to her mom every evening. Sometimes just a line, "Jasmine's blooming on the porch tonight." Other times, stories about kids chasing dogs along the roadside. Claudine saved every one of those texts in a folder called Daughter Coming Home. Ayanna also sent her location daily, usually between 5 and 6 p.m., a red dot on the family map that told them she was still here, still somewhere in the world. That's why, when the final red dot stopped moving, no one in the family could stay calm. To her small online community, Ayanna wasn't an influencer or activist, but everyone who met her, even briefly, remembered something hard to forget. A woman in Mobile, Alabama once wrote, "She stayed one night, brought banana bread her mom baked. She asked me what my childhood smelled like." Who asks that? The moments Ayanna created felt intimate, not because she was special, but because she made people feel seen. In a world overwhelmed by news and noise, she chose to hold on to what was small, and somehow that made her absence even harder to bear. What even her family didn't know was that Ayanna had considered not coming back. Her best friend, Nia, in Charlotte, received a message. In early April, just weeks before Ayanna vanished. It read, "I don't know if I'll come back to Atlanta. Maybe I'll find a small town, teach photography, or just live quietly. There's something out here that makes me feel free." Nia didn't tell anyone, not out of secrecy, but because she thought Ayanna was just romanticizing the journey like she always did. But after the disappearance, that message haunted her. If Ayanna truly meant to stay, did she leave on her own? Or did someone read that desire and use it to hide something else? The last night Ayanna texted home, Claudine had replied, "Make sure you eat something. Call me tomorrow, video chat, okay?" But Ayanna never replied. For the first time in over 40 straight days, no message came. The text stayed sent but never delivered. Her last known location appeared in a small river town called Tallulah, Mississippi. No one in her family knew why she'd gone there. It wasn't part of her route. It wasn't even near Louisiana's loop. Tallulah was a detour, an unexpected place. That was the moment her family felt it. The first time, something truly didn't feel right. Not just because of the silence, but because Ayanna wasn't the kind of person who changed plans without saying so. She was free-spirited, but never careless. 3 days later, Luther, usually quiet and soft-spoken, called the Madison County Sheriff's Office. He reported his daughter missing. The dispatcher took the details, then asked a final question. "Has she ever run away before?" There was a long pause. Then Luther replied, "She's never left without leaving a sign." And now, everything is silent. News of Ayanna Brooks's disappearance spread slowly, almost in silence. There were no headlines, no Amber Alert, no urgent searches with dogs or helicopters. Ayanna was an adult, a black woman traveling alone on a self-chosen journey, and the system simply didn't see that as urgent. The Brooks family, unfamiliar with fighting bureaucracy, started by printing flyers, launching a Facebook page called Find Ayanna, and reaching out to everyone she'd contacted in her final 2 weeks. Her father, Luther, drove 7 hours from Atlanta to the area near Pags, Tallulah, the location of her last known GPS. Ping, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, something was still there. He went to the local gas station, showed her picture, asked everyone. She was wearing a green jacket, riding a yellow e-bike. Did anyone see her? Most people shook their heads. One person said, "We get dozens of folks passing through each week." Who can remember? But one store clerk, Kira, from a small corner shop near the town's main intersection, remembered a young woman, Dusty from the road, who came in a few days earlier to buy bottled water and a box of strawberries. She didn't look like a typical backpacker, Kira said. There was something about her eyes, like she was new here, but not lost. When shown Ayanna's photo, Kira was nearly certain it was her. She also recalled that Ayanna had asked for directions to the river. She said she wanted to catch the sunset there. But when Kira had asked, "Where are you coming from?" Ayanna just smiled softly and said, "Just passing through." That was the last time anyone remembered seeing her. The local police, after receiving the family's formal report, agreed to conduct a basic check, not a full investigation, just a location verification. They sent Officer Maynard to the river area Ayanna was supposedly headed toward. That stretch of the Mississippi wasn't particularly dangerous, but it had soft ground, tall grass, few homes, and no cameras. Maynard found nothing, no bike, no backpack, no clear footprints. His report concluded no evidence of immediate danger or signs of foul play at this time, and therefore cannot be classified as a high-risk missing person. When Luther heard this, he didn't say much. He just stared into space, as if picturing his daughter standing somewhere out there in the middle of that field of reeds, unseen by anyone. But that night, back at the motel, Luther noticed something strange. The last photo Ayanna's sent to her mother included what looked like a still column of water in the background, possibly a dam or reservoir. But when they compared the image with maps of the Tallulah area, nothing matched. That body of water, whatever it was, wasn't supposed to be there. So where was Ayanna really when she took that picture? 2 days later, the Brooks family received a detailed cell location report from Ayanna's phone provider, thanks to a friend in the telecommunications industry, something local police hadn't requested. That report complicated everything. According to the log, her phone pinged a cell tower more than 18 miles northwest of Tallulah in an area of sparse woods locals called Crow's Crossing. The tower barely covered the region, but the ping was clear, 6:11 p.m., April 27th, 3 minutes before her final text, which meant Ayanna may never have been in Tallulah at Kyo, or she left right after the store visit. Or, more chillingly, someone else sent the final message. The family handed this information to the police, hoping it would trigger a full-scale search. But with limited resources, the answer remained the same. There's still no clear sign of criminal activity, so Luther and Claudine went themselves. They drove to Crow's Crossing with maps, printed photos, and the unshakable belief that if they didn't go, no one would. The area was avoided by locals, not because it was dangerous, but because it felt like nothing. Dirt roads overgrown with weeds, fragments of forest, once part of broken farmland, and the occasional rusted truck or collapsed hunting station. Luther tried matching trees, light angles, and water lines with Ayanna's last photo, but nothing aligned. Claudine walked slower and eventually stopped at an old tree. She cried, not out of despair, but because a memory came back. Ayanna, as a child, once asked, "Mama, if I ever got lost, would you come find me?" And Claudine had pulled her close and whispered, "I would turn the world upside down to find you." On the third day of their unofficial search, they met Isaiah, a retired ranger who still lived at the edge of the woods. When asked if anything unusual happened in late April, He paused and said, "I do remember one night, heard a loud metal sound, like something heavy hitting water. Figured it was a deer crashing through a fish trap. The next morning, he noticed the water near the deeper creek had changed color, like something had sunk. He showed them the path down to the water. There was nothing conclusive, but that detail, metal, water, silence, stayed with them for months. If something had been thrown in, what was it? And if Ayanna had been there, why did no one see her come back?" 1 week later, the Brooks family returned to Atlanta, feeling empty. They didn't talk much in the car. A cardboard box sat between the seats, filled with printed maps, GPS logs, and leftover flyers. It felt heavier than it should have. Back home, Claudine carefully filed each clue into a drawer, like old report cards you can't bear to throw away, hoping someday one would reveal what was missed. Luther rarely entered Ayanna's room, but each night he sat on the porch, turned on the light, and left the front door unlocked. "Just in case she comes back," he said, "I want her to see the light." And 3 weeks after Ayanna vanished, the media finally took notice, only after Nia, her best friend, wrote a heartfelt post online urging people to share her story. The post slowly went viral. Messages started trickling into the Find Ayanna page from people in Alabama, in Macon, in small towns, with no names. They shared tiny stories no one else had heard. How Ayanna once bought new shoes for a man living on the street. How she gave a disposable camera to a little girl because your eyes lit up like fire. These details didn't solve the mystery, but they began to pull people together in a strange, quiet way. Online sleuths got involved. On Reddit and missing persons forums, a thread titled, "What Happened to Ayanna Brooks?" quickly gained thousands of views. Users analyzed everything: the GPS, the timestamp, the sun's angle in her selfie, the length of shadows. One user, at DeltaTrace, claimed to be a former satellite imaging analyst and used AI to reconstruct the landscape in Ayanna's final photo. Based on foliage, water structures, and lighting, concluded that the image wasn't taken in Tallulah, but likely along a smaller offshoot river near the Louisiana border, in a swampy region not mentioned in any police report. It was a place with weak cell reception, where Ayanna could have continued westward after the gas station. And there, something may have happened. The family submitted these findings to authorities. But by then, it was June. The southern heat was rising, the swamp was flooding, and the family's funds were stretched thin. The official investigation was closed with a note. No judge. Confirmed evidence of foul play. No new leads. The Find Ayanna page quietly shifted from search hub to memorial. But her story didn't disappear. It lived on in comments, in reposted photos Ayanna had taken, and in the hearts of people who had never met her, but felt like they owed her something just the same. Here is the English translation of the passage you provided, adapted in a smooth, continuous narrative. Style suitable for documentary voiceover. In the fall of 2017, nearly 6 months after Ayanna went missing, woman named Marlene Jackson, who worked at a small diner off Highway 165, about 40 miles south of Tallulah, sent an email to the Find Ayanna page. In her message, she recalled a young woman who had come into the diner in late April wearing a green jacket, her sleeves and pant legs streaked with mud, and looking visibly tired. Marlene remembered her clearly because she didn't order food, just asked for a glass of water, then sat by the window, jotting something down in a small orange notebook. When shown Ayanna's photo, she gasped, "That's her! I'm sure of it." The timeline lined up, and if Marlene was right, it meant Ayanna had left the Tallulah area, traveling deeper into the edge of the Louisiana wetlands. The family immediately passed the tip to the Texas Parish Sheriff's Office, but once again, no formal search was launched. The location was outside the original case jurisdiction, and there wasn't enough evidence to reopen the file. Meanwhile, online forums began circulating a different theory that Ayanna had chosen to disappear. Some users dissected the poetic lines from her blog, especially one entry that read, "I don't want to return to the noise. I want to live in the stillness of every glance." They speculated she had deliberately removed herself from her old life perhaps for personal or psychological reasons. But Ayanna's close friend Nia pushed back hard. She posted private messages between them, texts about Ayanna's dreams of publishing a photo book, her plans, to host a pop-up street exhibit once the journey ended. Ayanna could be quiet, but she wasn't the type to vanish without telling anyone. She needed time alone, but she also needed connection. Her world thrived on small threads tying her to others. At the same time, another discrepancy emerged. A user named @BlueHickory, someone who had once worked power lines in the Louisiana swamps, explained that the GPS tower near Crow's Crossing was notorious for positional errors, especially during humid conditions. That raised a troubling possibility. Either Ayanna wasn't where the ping indicated, or someone had tampered with the signal. That theory sparked debate, but led some amateur investigators to re-examine the case, especially the inconsistencies in timeline, coordinates, and Ayanna's reported path. One of those investigators was Jordan Wells, an independent researcher who had once cracked a cold case in Texas using only Google Earth data. After compiling every publicly available detail, he published a lengthy post titled, "Maybe We're Looking the Wrong Way Because Someone Wants Us to." He pointed out 3 key red flags: the mismatch between the GPS, ping, and the last photo, the vague sightings in Pierre's outlying areas, and the unverified map found in Ayanna's bike. His conclusion: if Ayanna made it to the wetlands, there's a strong chance she didn't go alone. In October, a new effort emerged, not from police, but from a group of journalism students at Jackson State University. They chose Ayanna's case for a semester-long investigation into disappearances the media ignored. The team of 4, led by a student named Keisha Arnold, who had followed Ayanna's blog and cited her as inspiration for pursuing photojournalism, spent weeks interviewing locals, comparing maps, and digitally reconstructing her route. They weren't professionals, but they asked questions others had overlooked. Why would someone on an e-bike choose a road with no charging points? And why is the final photo tagged auto-edited instead of raw? That second question became crucial. The group discovered that the last photo Ayanna had sent, featuring a distant column of water, had been processed through a color adjustment tool. Its metadata showed missing original file markers, a common sign of images saved from another device. That raised 2 disturbing possibilities. Either Ayanna had edited the image to obscure her location, or someone else had done it after accessing her phone. Either way, it undermined the original assumption that the final message came directly and authentically from Ayanna herself. Meanwhile, another clue began to unravel. The crumpled map found inside her bike's battery case had always been assumed to be hers, but the students discovered it was a 2008 zoning map, the kind typically used in suburban development. More importantly, the circle drawn on it didn't match Ayanna's handwriting as seen in her travel notebook. A student specializing in forensic handwriting analysis concluded there's about a 70% chance that mark was made by someone else. If that's true, who marked it? And why would someone hide it inside her bike unless they wanted it to be found? At this point, a familiar question took on a darker edge. If Ayanna didn't send the final text, didn't take the final photo, and didn't mark that map, then who was crafting the narrative we've been following? And if someone had the skill to construct such a believable trail, they may have also erased the real one, the one Ayanna truly walked. Then, at the end of November, just as the case seemed to fade from public memory, a letter arrived at Claudine Brooks's home. No stamp, no postmark. The envelope simply read, "For Ayanna's mother," in a delicate, slanted script. Inside was a single slip of paper with a cryptic line. "Find the March photo, the one with no shadows." Claudine nearly broke down in tears. It was something only Ayanna would say. When an image turned out poorly, Ayanna used to joke, "Photos without shadows aren't real. Mom, you know that." The March photo was eventually found on an old hard drive. It had been taken in a tiny town near Macon, Georgia, early in Ayanna's journey. It showed a gray bus stop, weather-worn and sunlit, but just like the note said, there were no shadows. None from Ayanna, the bench, or any nearby object. And the file's metadata confirmed the photo had been edited in external software, something Ayanna rarely did, which begged the question, who altered the image? And why leave such a haunting clue? Meanwhile, Keisha's team uncovered something else. Satellite and weather data revealed that the part of the river where Ayanna's e-bike was found had no flooding, no major current shifts for at least 2 months after she vanished. In other words, the bike hadn't been washed there by nature. It had been placed. Someone had retrieved it, moved it, and dropped it at Kit. That exact spot, just enough to be found. It wasn't a natural trace. It was a message. But a message from who? All signs now pointed toward one mysterious figure, someone Ayanna had mentioned on her blog only once, by the name Mr. A. She described him as a craftsman who lives near the woods, tells stories with his hands in wood, and who had offered her a night's shelter somewhere near the Louisiana border. No one knew his real name. There were no photos, just a cryptic quote Ayanna recorded. Some things, if found too early, get taken for granted. In the current context, those words no longer felt poetic. They felt like a warning. And in a story where every lead seems to dissolve into fog, where every clue might be part of an erasure, searching for Mr. A is like chasing a shadow that never had a form, always there, never clear. If someone truly is pulling strings behind the scenes, then this is no longer a simple missing person case. This is a narrative, carefully crafted to bury the truth. In January 2018, nearly a year after Ayanna disappeared, a shocking development emerged in Monroe, Louisiana, about 60 miles from her last known location. Police arrested 27-year-old Desmond Ray for stealing an electric motorcycle. Inside the garage where he was found, they discovered an array of unusual items: solar battery panels, a guy's waterproof backpack, a digital camera, and most chillingly, a torn orange notebook with handwriting resembling Ayanna's. The reveal wasn't public at first, but leaked images circulated internally. One of Keisha's journalism students recognized the notebook. It matched the one Ayanna used in her selfies. The Brooks family immediately demanded a broader investigation, and authorities officially treated the case as a potential crime for the first time in nearly a year. Desmond had no serious criminal history, just minor thefts. He claimed he'd bought the items from a stranger in South the wetlands, and barely knew anyone named Ayanna. Yet his fingerprints were on the camera, and torn pages contained a scrawled message. I thought he just wanted to tell stories. It echoed Ayanna's description of Mr. A, her forest artisan who told stories with his hands instead of words. When police pressed him, Desmond offered no additional details. He could have been a middleman, holding the items for money. But how did he end up with a quarter of Ayanna's gear, especially her notebook? The Brooks believed if it wasn't Desmond, then the person who sold him these items is the someone who was with Ayanna and who knows the truth. At this point, Ayanna was no longer considered pressing her freedom. She was a victim. Terrifyingly, someone deliberately held her possessions, arranged the final message, and placed her e-bike where it would be found. Whoever did this knew how to manipulate perception to make disappearance look like a choice. Then another key detail surfaced. During questioning, investigators discovered Desmond had lived for over 3 months in a run-down wooden lean-to at the edge of White Tree Marsh, about 15 miles from where Ayanna's bike was found. That shack, part of an abandoned 1990s hunting camp, had no electricity or running water and rarely saw visitors. A search team uncovered recent human traces: old food, cans, cigarette butts, fabric curtains over windows. But the item that froze Claudine's heart was a water-stained photo wedged between the boards and tense, unpublished image of Ayanna in profile, her eyes looking away, light striking her cheek. It was unmistakably hers. Not long after, Keisha's group uncovered a handwritten note in Ayanna's own draft pages. Sometimes light hits your face like a warning. If it's too dim, you might not see who's standing right behind you. Matched with that hidden photograph, the note felt like a chilling epiphany, not poetic reflection. Then a former community woodworker in Monroe came forward, identifying a man known only as Arlen, a reclusive craftsman living in the marshes a few years ago. He matched the description of Mr. A, making wood art, telling stories silently, using no real name. The woodworker remembered Arlen telling him, "I keep what no one else can remember, but sometimes some things shouldn't be found." Once odd, now it sounded like a veiled confession. Outrage erupted online. The community realized they had been misled, led to believe Ayanna vanished willingly. Now it looked like her freedom had been co-opted, twisted into a narrative by someone else. The hashtag Justice for Ayanna began trending. Her photos, her blog posts, and her memories were shared thousands of times. They weren't just searching for leads. They were reclaiming her identity. Then, unexpectedly, Desmond Ray asked to meet privately with Claudine Brooks. No attorney, no officer, just him and Ayanna's mother. In 10 minutes, he handed Claudine a folded paper. On it were 3 words: Watchtower number 2. Watchtower number 2. 3 simple words that stunned both the Brooks family and Keisha's team. Once they cross-referenced old maps and documents, they realized the phrase referred to an old fire-watching station built in the 1970s. It lay deep in swamp country, about 12 miles from White Tree Marsh, accessible only by narrow footpaths. One February morning, Keisha's students, a local reporter, and a family friend ventured into that area. After slogging through mud and standing water for hours, they found the ruins, an old wooden cabin sagging under ancient trees. Inside, they found little: rotted wood frames, heavy cobwebs, and one desk carved with the initials A+. But the smell, a dank, sour, moldy odor, was unmistakable. Old belongings left too long and damp. Darkness. Then, in a corner, under a lifted floorboard, they discovered a backpack, Ayanna's backpack. No doubt, it had a custom cloth tag sewn by Claudine when Ayanna was a child. Inside, no phone, no wallet. Just a faded green jacket, a small sketchbook, and a melted half-eaten chocolate bar stuck to its wrapper. In the sketchbook were repetitive loops and a single, eerily plain note scrawled in italic. "I'm still here, but maybe I've been replaced." That sentence cut deeper than any worry. It confirmed their worst fear. Ayanna didn't just disappear. Someone had replaced her in story, in image, in message, even in memory. A fabricated identity had been carefully constructed to bury the real person. What they thought was evidence, the backpack, the bike, the messages, were masks hiding something far darker. DNA tests came back. There was no comfort. The fingerprints in the cabin didn't match Ayanna. There was no hair, no biological trace. The proof that should have anchored her presence had, instead, become part of an elaborate illusion, precisely staged to manipulate belief, to infect memory with doubt. And now, they realized they were deeper in the maze than ever, and the truth lay beyond layers of deception, built by someone who knew how to make disappearance look like choice. In March 2018, exactly 1 year after Ayanna's disappearance, an essay was published on an independent investigative blog. Its title was simple: "Maybe We Created Ayanna." The Asanasio. Author: Lester Vaughn, a media researcher with no personal connection to the Brooks family and no role in the search, had followed the case from the beginning. In his piece, he analyzed how the story of Ayanna had spread: beautiful photos, an inspiring journey, tales of freedom, solitude, and a mysterious artisan. All of it, he argued, shaped the perfect image of a missing black woman who dared to live differently. That image had grown so powerful that anything that didn't fit into it was overlooked or discarded. Lester wasn't blaming Ayanna or her family. On the contrary, it was a gut punch to those emotionally invested in the search. Because if he was right, then every theory, every search party, every map, and every blog post may have been orbiting around a version of Ayanna we wanted to believe in, not the real one. And if that was true, had the way we told the story actually helped erase the truth? Suddenly, pieces once considered evidence began to unravel. The final photo, if staged, could mean Ayanna wasn't alive when it was sent. And if she didn't send it, who knew her phone's passcode? The backpack found at watchtower number 2 without her DNA, was it ever truly hers? Or just a decoy crafted to throw searchers off course? Even Desmond Ray, long considered a potential link, now seemed uncertain. He'd insisted he never met her, and while his word wasn't gospel, there was no proof otherwise. Then came a darker theory. What if Ayanna had been taken far from the wetlands long before any of these clues surfaced, and every discovery afterward had been deliberately planted, not to find her, but to stop the search, a smokescreen to lull people into thinking, she's probably still around. We just need patience. But if it was all a veil, who stood to benefit from dragging the story out? Doubt. Turned inward onto the storytellers themselves. A Reddit user once believed to be a friend of Ayanna was exposed for posting under multiple aliases, possibly steering the narrative. Some eyewitness tips sent to the Brooks family were revealed as false, and suddenly the family plunged into a crisis deeper than loss. Not just mourning Ayanna, but questioning what part of her they had ever truly known. What memories were real? What was invented by thousands of strangers online? And what might have been constructed from the very beginning? In April, during a brief local radio interview, Claudine Brooks was asked, if you could ask Ayanna one thing, what would it be? She paused for a long time. Then, in a near whisper, she said, are you still in Bato? There's somewhere, even just a part of you. It wasn't a question about location, but about existence. After everything, her deepest fear wasn't that Ayanna was gone. It was losing the belief that the Ayanna she knew had ever truly existed the way she remembered. Skepticism seeped into every corner. Her blog posts, once shared as raw, heartfelt dispatches, were picked apart by linguistic analysts. Some argued the writing style didn't fully match Ayanna's known patterns. The punctuation, the phrasing, even the voice. It was all under scrutiny. A digital linguistics team suggested several posts had been quietly edited after Ayanna disappeared by someone with access to her account. But who and why? The family requested login records from the telecom provider, but were told the data had expired. Eyewitnesses like the gas station clerk or ranger, Isaiah, were now suspect, either victims of flawed memory or worse, manipulation. As one fact after another crumbled, only emotion remained, and even that felt fragile. Were we grieving Ayanna because of who she truly was, or because we'd fallen for a version so perfectly crafted it was impossible not to love? In a rare public statement, Claudine reflected, I used to believe if I stayed patient, she'd come home, or someone would lead me to her. But now I wonder, what if I've been led away from her? Every step I thought brought me closer might have pulled me farther. Her words spread online like a final echo, one of the last truly human notes in a maze now consumed by data. Then, in the midst of the chaos, an anonymous email arrived at Keisha's inbox. No message, no name. Just a file titled, The Final Shadow. Attached was a blurry image, not sharp, not clear, but unmistakably eerie. A silhouette of someone standing in the middle of a marsh, lit by a fading sunset. No features. No certainty it was Ayanna. But the framing, the tone, the angle, it was exactly how Ayanna used to shoot. And the most disturbing part, the photo had no shadow. Just like the note in that first anonymous letter, look for the photo where there is no shadow. This story had come full circle. Only now, no one could say whose shadow was missing, or who had ever truly stood in that frame. In the summer of 2018, Louisiana was hit by an unusually intense heat wave. Small rivers began to dry up, revealing beds that had been hidden underwater for years. During a routine cleanup in a nature preserve near White Tree Marsh, a volunteer group stumbled upon a strange object lodged between two large roots. A battered, nearly shattered old camera. They sent it to a local lab, and somehow, against all odds, the memory card inside was still intact and recoverable. There were 6 photos in total. None of them were clear. Each looked hastily taken, dim lighting, the sound of water, the whisper of wind, mostly trees, winding forest trails, and still water. But the 4th image held something different. A rare frame. A young woman in a hat stood at a distance from the yell, lens holding another camera in her hands, staring directly toward whoever was behind the lens. There was no way to confirm it was Ayanna, but nothing ruled it out either. The hair, the stance, the gaze, they all stirred. Something deep. And the most haunting part? The woman had a shadow. A long one stretching behind her into a place that Sasaha light couldn't reach. The photo didn't offer answers. It wasn't proof. But it echoed, like a voice returning from somewhere, between truth and illusion, between what we believe is real and what we're afraid to accept. The Brooks family chose not to release it publicly. Not to hide it, but because for the first time in over a year, it felt like Ayanna wasn't being pulled away from them anymore. Wherever she was, whether alive or not, some part of her still lived within the story. Not as part of a forum, a conspiracy, or a think piece, but as love, as memory, as the right not to be forgotten. And Mr. A, no one ever found him. No records, no photographs, no confirmation of his real name, or even if he existed at all. Some believe he orchestrated the entire journey. Others say he was never real to begin with, just a symbol, a reflection of everything hidden in Black history. Voices never recorded, paths never mapped, losses never fully investigated. Maybe he was just an idea. Or maybe, like a shadow, he was always there, even if no one ever saw him. In 2019, Keisha graduated with a thesis titled What We Choose, to remember the journey of Ayanna Brooks and the nature of collective memory. In it, she wrote, "Maybe what matters isn't knowing exactly where Ayanna went. It's that we didn't let her vanish completely. We held on to what's most precious, the feeling that someone like her once existed, once smiled at a sunset, once wanted to slow down and capture the fragile beauty of life." Ayanna Brooks is still officially missing. No arrests, no criminal case, no ending. But her story lives on in the memories of mothers, young women, street photographers, and anyone who's ever felt lost in this world. Because sometimes, not everyone who disappears is truly gone, and not everyone who remains is really still here.